Hello and welcome to the Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely, co-founder of the Gaggle. So here at the Gaggle, we have in the past drawn attention to a strange outfit known as Institute for the Study of War. The reason why we've referred to it is that much of the mainstream media, in particularly the New York Times, frequently cites the Institute for the Study of War as an authoritative source for what is going on in Ukraine. So the name invariably sounds very anodyne, Institute for the Study of War, Institute for the Study of Peace, Institute for the Study of Peace and War, all very good sounding names. Never does the New York Times tell us anything about who's behind this, who's funding it, who staffs it, who are the people on its board. It's just simply cited as self-evidently a disinterested, neutral, scholarly institute. And the findings of this Institute for the Study of War are invariably in accord with the New York Times editorial desiderata, namely that the war is going very badly for Russia, going very well for Ukraine. Russia has really little prospects of victory, and every time there's any kind of a battle between Russian and Ukrainian forces, Russians generally do very poorly, even when they grudgingly acknowledge some Russian gains. They immediately qualified that by, well, but they're making very little progress. They're still incompetently led, adopting terrible tactics, and Russia has no real chance of achieving its strategic objectives. Now, if you actually go to the website of the Institute for the Study of War, you find that the people who are behind it are all very well-known neocons, people who have been actively advocating on behalf of US intervention for years and years. On its board since General Jack Keane, the four-star general who is a mainstay at Fox News, and who's also on the board of a variety of military procurement firms. Again, never mentioned, as if somehow the fact that he's making money off it is totally irrelevant. We should not draw attention to that at all, that his analysis and his policy recommendations are in keeping with his financial interests. They're totally irrelevant, should have nothing to do with anything. So that's Jack Keane. And of course, the institute itself is run by Frederick Kagan, who is, of course, a member of the Kagan family. Remember, the patriarch was Donald Kagan, arch neocon, but also a classical scholar. But the most famous of the Kagans is, of course, Robert Kagan, who was, along with Bill Kristol, was the founder of the Project for the New American Century. And of course, that project was absolutely instrumental in pushing the United States into invading Iraq in 2003. And Robert Kagan has been a kind of ubiquitous presence on the foreign policy scene in the United States. And his wife is, of course, Victoria Nuland, also a ubiquitous presence. She's been really there for decades. She served the Bush administration, she served the Obama administration. She took a miss when it came to Trump, but now she's back with Biden, holding a very senior position in the US State Department. In the past, she had been a US ambassador to Nato, and so she's there. She's again activist, interventionist, full-blown neocon. So she's the wife of Fred Kagan, so daughter-in-law of Donald Kagan, and so on. So they're the people who are behind the Institute for the Study of War. And again, the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, Wall Street Journal, the people who rely on their reports never draw attention to who the Kagans are, never draw attention to the money is behind it, because obviously the money is rolling in from the various military contractors, again, they obviously have a vested interest in advocating war, advocating interventionism. And then, of course, what the US media do, then it is then repeated by the world media, particularly the European media, because the European media just simply does everything that the mainstream American media does. So if the mainstream American media give the good housekeeping seal of approval to the Institute for the Study of War, then so does Der Spiegel, so does Le Monde, so does the Guardian, so does the Times, the Telegraph. They've always done it. The Europeans just blindly follow liberal American media. So I've always been very amused by naive people like Noam Chomsky, who always insist that there's some European perspective. Somehow the Europeans don't see the world the way the Americans do. No, the Europeans just follow the Americans. They just, you tell us what to think and we'll think it. Anyway, that's the Institute for the Study of War. And so no one has really drawn attention to this, the people who are behind the Institute for the Study of War, until an article appeared earlier this week. The article's author is Robert Wright, who, if you don't know, was many years ago editor of the New Republic. So he was one of those figures who were part of the stable of writers around the New Republic in the late 80s, early 90s. Some other figures are quite well known, like Michael Kinsley, Mickey Kaus. They were kind of very clever writers, generally liberal on domestic policy, but were very much neocons, as was their publisher, their boss, Marty Peretz. So Peretz was, again, fervently pro-Israel, but generally fervently pro-interventionist. And so the editors that he appointed followed his lead. And as I imagine in those days, Robert Wright did. But that was all many years ago. And he's now still that kind of, I don't know, semi-neoliberal, semi-neocon. But he's not quite as gung-ho for interventionism as the New Republic of the late 80s and 1990s was. So he tends to be quite critical of US foreign policy, and particularly he's not a great fan of Israel, and there he obviously distinguishes himself quite starkly from Marty Peretz. So anyway, Robert Wright wrote this article about the Institute for the Study of War. And while there were interesting things in the article, and again, generally I'm in agreement with it, they are bad news. It's a very mealy-mouthed, weak, cowardly article, which it's pretty much now par for the course in America, which is that if you are going to criticize war hawks and Russophobes and pro-interventionists, you have to be so careful. You have to be really walk on eggshells and make so many concessions and so many caveats that in the end you feel like, so what's the point? What have we learned? What have you achieved by writing this? So I want to show you the tone and thrust of this article. I'll publish it. I'll post it in full on the Gaggles Locals site. So Let me show it to you. So, yeah, so here we are. So this is the title, A Case Study in American Propaganda, and saying, what is the Institute for the Study of War, and why do America's elite media outlet trust it for all of their on-the-ground Ukraine information? So, it sounds promising. You think, okay, that's good. Yeah, I mean, you think, well, yeah, that's kind of been what I've been thinking, but why is this always cited as an authoritative, disinterested, scholarly source for the New York Times? So, well, let's see Wright's expose. And almost from the beginning, you get the sense Wright is not going to deliver the goods. There's going to be a lot of words, a lot of hot air, and he's not going to deliver. So he says it's harder in this pluralistic system, that's ours, that's we in America, we have this pluralistic system, than in Russia for a single powerful person or institution to create a single dominant narrative. So if propaganda is going to happen here, it will have to happen less straightforwardly than in Russia, with less in the way of centralized control. And that makes it harder to pin down. In other words, a pluralistic system, that's us, while in some ways making it more difficult for propaganda to prevail, also offers the propaganda that does prevail good camouflage. All right, let's go on. But there are two things about the Institute for the Study of War that you may not know. First is the extent of its influence. Since war broke out in February, ISW has been the elite media's go-to think tank for information analysis. Yeah, that's right. Barely a day goes by that it isn't cited by the Times, the Post, the Journal. And then it says the second thing you may not be aware of is how ideological the academic sounding Institute for the Study of War is. It has neoconservative roots and is run and staffed by pretty extreme hawks. Over the years, it has gotten funding from General Dynamics, Raytheon, lesser known defense contractors, and big companies like General Motors that aren't known as defense contractors, but do get Pentagon contracts. Okay, so fine. And then it says, before saying more about ISW, I want to emphasize that I'm not claiming to have caught it in some capital crime. Oh, heaven forbid. The Institute doesn't spread untruths, even if it's selective about the truths it promotes and tactical in how it arranges them. That's part of my point. One reason propaganda often flies under the radar in America is that it can be subtle. Well, if you are selective in what you present only one side of the case, you ignore the other side, then you are doing propaganda. I mean, I don't know whether it's subtle or it's not subtle. It is known as propaganda. I mean, when you think of what we've always said about propaganda, let's say communist propaganda. Say, well, many of the points they make is true. But you say, okay, it's propaganda because it's very selective and it lays the case out in a very tendentious way. So now, this business of pluralistic, what does that mean? By Wright's own admission, the most important media outlets in the West, because when you talk about New York Times, Washington Post, CNN, the Wall Street Journal, not only are they important in the United States, but they are picked up worldwide as authoritative sources. If New York Times says something is the case, then people accept it. So, when you say it's pluralistic, what does that mean it's pluralistic? I mean, yeah, there are obviously many voices, there are many dissenting voices, but they don't get the platform that the mainstream media get. So, and then he goes on here. Another claim I'm not making, so he's not, the second time he's saying, I'm not making this. I'm not saying this, don't shoot me. Please don't shoot me. I'm not saying this. Another claim I'm not making is that ISW has exerted pivotal influence in the case of Ukraine. I'm not even saying that the larger network of hawkish think tanks it's part of has been pivotal. Heaven forbid, don't even say that. When a big country run by a famously ruthless autocrat invades a smaller neighbor that's a democracy, Americans will naturally and rightly side with the country that got invaded and will favor giving it support. In that sense, the Institute for the Study of War, along with other voices that advocate robust military spending, has been pushing on an open door. So notice what he's already done here. He's pretty much given the game away. He sort of pretty much said Russia is the aggressor. Russia is run by a famously ruthless autocrat. The neighbor, the smaller neighbor, is a democracy. He doesn't even bother to explain in what way it's a democracy, in what way it is a country that outlaws rival and opposition political parties, that outlaws rival media outlets, that imprisons political opponents. In what way is that a democracy in a country in which the government itself came to power as a result of a violent coup? How does that get to be a democracy? During all this time, Russia has been having regular elections. No one has come to power by a coup. But nonetheless, again, he just thinks it's self-evident. He puts that forward. And then he says, Americans rightly side with the country that got invaded. So therefore, the Institute, which is on the side of the country, the democracy that got invaded, and rightly on the side of the democracy that was invaded, so it's doing nothing wrong. And then you ask, so why are you writing this? I mean, if Institute is doing God's work, siding with the angels against the ruthless autocrats, why are you writing this? Anyway, so it says here, whatever you think of this aid, and again, I consider helping a nation resist invasion a generally good cause. So therefore, it's already, that's great. You know, the aid is good. Fine, give them what they want because it's a good cause. Again, he doesn't explain why is that a good cause. But you know, anyway, you can't deny that the climate of American opinion on Ukraine is very favorable for defense contractors. So again, having already admitted all this, acknowledged, you know, all of this showing, hey, I'm on your side, I think it's a good cause. He's now going, oh, well, it's good for the defense contractors. So what? Why is that an issue that should attract anyone's attention? If you think the defense contractors are on the side of good, they're on the side of the angels, they're providing the weapons that the angels will be able to fight back against the devils, why am I supposed to be worried about that the defense contractors are making a lot of money? I think the Institute for the Study of War is one reason for that, even if a small reason among bigger ones. Small reason among bigger ones. Again, it's a small reason, so why are you writing this? Anyway, and more to the point, ISW is a case study in how influence on a wartime narrative can be exerted in barely perceptible ways. Well, it's barely perceptible for a very good reason. And that is that the media that go to the Institute for the Study of War make sure that there's very little perception going on. They never spell out who is behind the Institute for the Study of War. That's a decision. That's nothing, you know, some great subtlety of the propaganda system, requiring some PhD type dissertation. It's a conscious decision. had it been a think tank arguing something different, arguing the opposite, arguing against intervention, arguing against the activities of the Zelensky government, saying that there's more than one side to what's going on in Ukraine, you bet the New York Times would be out trying to sniff out who's behind this think tank, who's bankrolling it. You know, so that, well, there's nothing barely perceptible. You know, there are powerful forces that want to ensure that it is barely perceptible. And then, you know, again, president, founder of is Kimberly Kagan, married to Fred Kagan. Fred is a well-known conservative, blah, blah, everything that I've already said. And then Kagan's wife, Nuland, is the State Department official who very publicly supported Ukraine's 2014 Maidan revolution, the overthrow of pro-Russia President Yanukovych, which led Russia to seize Crimea and give military support to secessionist rebels in the Donbass. Nuland also played a behind-the-scenes role in this transition of power, according to some of her detractors, amounted to orchestrating a coup. Well, you know, you don't have to go to her detractors or to her defender. That phone call is available. I mean, until YouTube took it down, but it was widely available on YouTube. And she says that to the US ambassador to Ukraine, Jeffrey Pyatt, that they are discussing who will take over in Kiev. It's an armed coup. I mean, what else is it? I mean, can you imagine some, if it was Russian, maybe having a discussion about a change of government in Kazakhstan, and you know, and I know Lavrov is having a conversation with the Russian ambassador to Kazakhstan, and they're you know, they're discussing who will be in this government, who's going to be out of this government. You know, Yats is the guy, Klitsch is out. I mean, are you really going to have a word? According to her detractors, according to Russia's detractors. And then, as long as we're going down rabbit hole, then he goes on about Kagan Crystal Project, the project of the New American Century, and then it said is Bruce Jackson, who worked at Lockheed Martin. Jackson had earlier organized the U.S. Committee to expand NATO, which successfully lobbied for what its name suggested, lobbied for. Some people think NATO expansion, in particular George W. Bush's 2008 addition of Ukraine to the list of future members, helped cause the Ukraine war. But in any event, NATO expansion has over the past quarter century made lots and lots of money for Lockheed Martin. So we're back again to this defense contractors, as if that's a really such a fascinating topic, you know. But again, to I guess liberals like Robert Wright, you know, that's the big thing. Robert, and I guess the New Republic type liberals, the people around, you know, the Michael Kinsley way of thinking, you know, that's all that really matters. Were these defense contractors lobbying, Washington pork, gravy going to certain firms, you know, that's all that really ever fascinated them. Whereas really, it's just a sideshow. I mean, the big issue is NATO expansion. Some people make money out of it. That's a secondary issue. But anyway, notice also how tendentiously phrased it is. In particular, George W. Bush's 2008 addition of Ukraine to the list of future members. Yes, it's true that it was Bush who pushed in 2008 to put Ukraine as a list of future members, and NATO adopted that at the Bucharest summit. But this was pursued vigorously by Bush's successors. Because after 2008, remember what happened. 2010, there's an election in Ukraine. Viktor Yanukovych wins that election. Yanukovych ran on a platform of ending the Ukraine-NATO convergence. And Yanukovych said that Ukraine should be a neutral state. And he went ahead, he ran on that platform that Ukraine should be neutral, and he did it. He ended the whole NATO partnership, and he inserted this into the Ukraine constitution, that Ukraine will be neutral. That's what Yanukovych promised, and Yanukovych did it. How then did NATO respond? The NATO powers responded by getting rid of Yanukovych. I mean, from the beginning, they wanted Yanukovych out, even though he pursued the policy on which he was elected in 2010. And then, of course, the coup, which was orchestrated by Obama, the goal was always to get Ukraine into NATO. It wasn't going to be easy. No one said it was going to be an easy task, but that was always the goal. That's what they pursued. Trying to make it all about George W. Bush. Oh, Bush, well, Bush, Cheney, like these Robert Wrights, Bush, Cheney, Bush, that's their mentality. Then we can somehow blame it all on Bush and pretend that Bush's successors didn't pursue this policy at least as vigorously as Bush did, particularly Obama's coup. And then, of course, Biden's absolutely catastrophic policy from February 2021 onwards, and which led to the disaster of February 24th. And then it says, in the case of Ukraine war, ISW's reporting and analysis activities have been extraordinary. They institute issues daily, battlefield updates, complete with maps of regions in Ukraine that show shifts in territorial control. These summaries are intelligently, crisply written, cover lots of ground efficiently. If I were a newspaper reporter writing about the war, I would find them appealing. So are you ready for my big reveals about glaring bias in ISW analysis? There aren't any. That's part of my point. The bias imparted by ISW is subtle. Its incremental effects are barely perceptible, but they add up over time. And what they add up to is the war according to our side. Little shadings here and there create more or less the picture of the war that the Ukrainian government is trying to present. Well, I never. Wow. A neocon outfit, and neocons have been running think tanks and outfits and writing public letters and getting their story out to the mainstream media. They've been doing this for, well, now 50 years, ever since the start of the neoconservative movement in 1972. They're masters at this. What? Oh, whoa, it's a very subtle propaganda. That's not subtle. There's nothing subtle about this. You can see they are presenting the Ukraine side of it. The fact that they do it in a way that suggests a scholarly approach, that suggests that they've done some serious research. Well, yeah, I mean, they're pros. They've been doing this a long time. They know how to do this. There's nothing wonderful about this. To suggest that, wow, it's going to be really tough taking them on, because there's some real serious thinking that's going on here. And it says, it may not take much conscious effort for the crew of 5 ISW analysts, including Fred Kagan, who prepare these reports, to put a pro-Ukraine spin on them. To some extent, the spin is structural. ISW seems to have a policy of taking battlefield reports from the Ukrainian government seriously, but not taking reports from the Russian government seriously. Wow, who'd have thunk that? I mean, who'd have seen that coming? We have a Ukraine which is spreading its own version of the story, because they're Ukrainian government propaganda. That happens to be in accordance with the foreign policy, US foreign policy elite thinking. It's in accord with the thinking of the US media. The US media are always in bed with the foreign policy elite. And lo and behold, these reports, which are based entirely on what the Ukraine government is saying, is then fed back to the media who want these kinds of reports, and then the media present them as the disinterested findings of disinterested scholars. What a surprise. I'd never believed that that could happen. When you add up all of ISW's little instances of spin, how much do they matter? I don't know. Who's got time to even find them all, much less add them up? Certainly, if you drew a schematic diagram of American propaganda as it pertains to national security, including all the interest groups that try to impart their spin and where their money comes from and which media they succeed in influencing and so on, ISW wouldn't come close to dominating the diagram. Why not? I don't, if somebody can understand what that means, please let me know, because I don't get it. I mean, there is a block of propaganda. I mean, Obama when he was doing all these exit interviews, doing a kind of apologia for all his disastrous mistakes in foreign policy, he talked about the foreign policy blob. The whole point of the foreign policy blob is that they think in one way only. Within that blob, of course, many think tanks, many newspapers make their contribution, but it's all the same shop. It's all the same kitchen. All the stories are all cooked in the same kitchen. They're served out on different plates. It's like the old joke about the Indian Row, like that 6th Street in New York downtown, which has every single house on it is an Indian restaurant. And so the old joke was that there was just simply one kitchen that served all the restaurants. And it's probably true. So it looked like they were all different restaurants. Oh, I think we'll go to this one. Oh, let's go to this one. I mean, that looks, oh, this one's more expensive. Oh, no, that looks good value. But it's the same. It's the same kitchen serving all of them. It just gives you the illusion that these are all different restaurants, and as if there's some great choice. So, oh, there's some fancy deco here. They go, oh, they have interesting appetizers. This one's a little spicier, but it's all cooked in the same kitchen. Same thing with the foreign policy. It's cooked in the same kitchen. Obama was right. It's the blob. But that's one of my main points. This diagram isn't as streamlined as the Russian version would be. There are so many moving parts in American opinion-making machinery that it's hard to figure out what's going on, hard to follow all the institutionally important biases to their roots. What absolute twaddle. What absolute drivel. The amazing thing is that there is a uniformity in American foreign policy thinking, whether it's on Yugoslavia, unanimity on Yugoslavia, unanimity on Iraq, unanimity on Libya, unanimity on Syria, and by and large, unanimity on Ukraine. Now, yeah, there always would be some maverick voices, but that's not the suggestion that there is so many moving parts. Yeah, there's okay, Tucker Carlson. It's always brought up that we'll bring up Tucker Carlson. Okay, there's a different take. He's not part of the mainstream. But the point is, it's always Tucker Carlson. Where's the other Tucker? Where are the other Tucker Carlsons? I mean, where are the other mavericks? There aren't. So, you look at cable news, including Fox, MSNBC, CNN. When it comes to foreign policy, they think identically. They think just as the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Washington Post. They all think identically. So where does he get on? Oh, there's so many different moving parts. There's so many different things. Unlike in Russia. Well, there's as much uniformity and diversity in Russian foreign policy thinking as there is here. You watch some of the Russian talk shows. There's disagreement. I mean, by and large, they're in agreement about the desirability of Russia's special operations. There's generally agreement on the Kiev regime, but they're disagreement. I mean, watch any of the Russian talk shows, whether it's Solovyev Live or Evening with Solovyev or The Big Game. There are disagreements. In fact, there are more disagreements. I'd say there was actually more disagreements than there are on the American talk shows. But again, Wright doesn't know, and Wright has no interest in any of this. I mean, to him, it's just, Russia is just this, entity, some, the other that you can just simply attribute to anything you like. I mean, it's so it's so monstrous that you can pretty much say whatever you want about Russia. Indeed, and I guess this is my other main point. It's apparently hard to follow even a single institution's bias to its fruits. I feel pretty sure that very few readers of the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, or the Washington Post read passages attributed to the Institute for the Study of War with a grain of salt that is appropriate, given its ideology and its funding, because for one thing, they don't know about the ideology and funding. No, and they're not interested, because I think many of the readers of the New York Times are already in agreement with the editorial line of the New York Times, and and the New York Times then cites the Institute for the Study of War. The New York Times give the Institute for the Study of War its imprimatur, and it says, oh, it's non-partisan, independent. So it says, okay, well, that's pretty good. I mean, why would they look into the sources of funding? The only people who want to look into the sources of funding are the people who are in disagreement with the line of the Times and the Institute for the Study of War. They might say, hey, who is behind this? But not the readers of the New York Times. I mean, readers of the New York Times, to them, Russia is bad, Ukraine is good, Trump is even worse, and Trump is somehow to blame for Ukraine. They're not quite sure how, but Trump is basically to blame. That's all they need. More surprisingly and more depressingly, a lot of presumably sophisticated American journalists seem equally uninformed. At least that's the only explanation I have for why America's elite media outlets routinely and uncritically relay ISW takes. Look, I mean, you can be informed, you can be uninformed. When you're uninformed, that's because you don't want to be informed. It's not a question of, these sophisticated American journalists are uninformed as if somehow, they're being lazy. They don't want to be informed. They want to be told something, and the Institute for the Study of War tells it to them. And even if you were tell them, well, the people who are behind this are the Kagans, they'll say, okay, and I'm supposed to be upset by that. Robert Kagan, he's all right. Now, it is true, and this is something that a cowardly person like Robert Wright doesn't pursue. How is it that after the Iraq War debacle, when it seemed like everybody was against any more of these invasions, any more of these aggressive wars, any more of these cockamamie interventionist schemes on trumped up pretext, how is it when Bill Kristol and Kagan and the Project for the New American Century and all that, and the George Bush and Cheney and all that, which had come into disrepute after the Iraq War debacle, how did it come about that suddenly no one really cares anymore about Kagan? So okay, Kagan, that's a good guy. I'll listen to Kagan. How come they've all forgiven Bill Kristol or Victoria Nuland? That's, I think, a really interesting, which might, but again, Wright doesn't want to go there, because then, the fact that the journalists seem okay with Kagan and Kristol, even though the very same people 10 years ago were shaking their fists against, oh, they misled us, they lied us into a war. Never again will we be misled by neocon propaganda. An end to forever wars. What happened to all that? Now, apparently, Kagan and Kristol are the good guys, and we're supposed to believe what they say. The people who lied us into the Iraq war, now they're apparently telling us the truth. But again, Wright isn't going to go there. Yeah, and then blah, blah. And then it says, the sincerity with which these experts can thus profess their beliefs is one reason American propaganda is inconspicuous. How is it inconspicuous? To whom is it inconspicuous? I mean, people have been writing about this. We talked earlier about Chomsky, Herman, and of course many others, you know, younger generations of writers. I mean, about American propaganda system. And I mean, inconspicuous. You don't notice it. I read the New York Times. I go, okay, sounds about right. Yeah, you know, they're telling us, you know, that you know how the war's going. Yeah, I'll read the New York Times on Vietnam. Yeah, I'll read the New York Times on the Gulf War and Iraq and weapons of mass destruction. Yeah, New York Times, Kosovo. Yeah, I'm down. They're telling me the truth. Yeah. It's inconspicuous. This much diversity is better than less diversity. One of the many reasons I'd rather live in America than in Russia, still sometimes the diversity belies a deeper narrative unity. A unity grounded in the power of highly motivated special interests, and that's especially true when the subject is national security. Supporting Ukraine is a good cause, but undiscerning support is never a good policy. And it's especially not good in the current situation, a war involving a nuclear superpower and various regional tinderboxes. So any impediments to a clear view of what's going on in Ukraine, however subtle they may be, are things we should try to identify and overcome. And if you ask what impediments, the answer is, that's what I mean. So that's Robert Wright's article. So as you can see, you know, he writes here, you know, his conclusion is a reasonable one, which is we should take anything the Institute for the Study of War says with a pinch of salt. The problem is, and this is something that I keep, you know, harping on about, especially, you know, all the published on antiwar.com, Responsible Statecraft, the American Conservative, you know, I've been saying this till I'm blue in the face. The problem is the conclusions they come to are fine. You know, that's not, I mean, I go along with that. But they reach it by, you know, weak arguments. And when you present weak arguments, you're only going to lose the argument. And I think that's the problem here. To Institute for the Study of War is very bad news. It's not doing anything very subtle. It's not doing anything very sophisticated. It is standard propaganda practice. We saw it. We've seen the same thing in every single American military caper. This is exactly the same thing with the Iraq and the weapons of mass destruction. The Serbs are committing genocide. It's with Gaddafi is about to commit genocide in Libya. It's the same playbook, same thing. Nothing changes. There's no great subtlety here at all. And we shouldn't, you know, give them the compliment of saying, well, you're on the right side, you know, and I agree with you on everything. But, you know, we really need to make sure that everyone knows that these defense contractors are making a lot of money. It's just not enough. So yeah, we need less Institute for the Study of War, and we need rather more forthright and vigorous analysis, which we try to accomplish here at the Gaggle. So anyway, thank you very much for joining me. I hope this was instructive. We'll be back very soon. And remember, if you like the Gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye.